let's get started. Hello, everybody, and welcome to Eternal Cast. I am Neon, and I am joined today by Sir Rhino. How are you doing?
I am doing great. Much better than my draft record would indicate so far.
Yeah, having so troubles getting used to the new set a bit, maybe. A bit of adjustment.
Maybe we'll figure that out. I hope not. That's not. I'm gonna just say it's all bad luck. I think my play has been perfect and my drafting has been infallible so far.
Yeah, that's probably the case. That's probably it.
Yeah.
So we are doing the whole set review for Limited. I know there's been a little while since we've cast, and there's just been a ton of stuff that have happened between now and then. There's lots of cards to talk about for constructed purposes, but we wanted to do just the good old-fashioned Limited set review all at once, get that out early into the format for people to be able to draft. We are also doing this live on stream, so if might be taking some questions at various points from the audience, or bring things up that if they point out. So just be aware of that for those who are listening from home. That this will be a slightly different format than usual, but we definitely are going to be getting across the good old fashioned podcast styling for you at home. So that's what we're up to today. How does that sound to you?
Sounds fun. And possibly informative. I guess that's possibly also part of it.
Maybe barely. We'll put a little bit of information in there from time to time. So we are going to be giving all of our cards that we encounter a grade. We're hoping to go through all of the cards today, not just commons and uncommons, but all of them. It's a bold order, but we'll have to try and move quickly and get through that. But the grading is a helpful mechanism for just kind of keeping different things in perspective. Like you'll probably hear us talking about various cards, but like, oh yeah, we really like this thing relative to other stuff, but in reality we both just think it's like a C plus as opposed to a C, rather than like don't get it conflated as like, oh, they think it's really good, it must be like premium card. It's like, no, it's just good for a common, etc. So these gradings are, I think, are helpful for that and giving some context. So that'll be something that you'll be hearing a lot about as we're going through. So I wanted to give some rating, give the rating system at the top, so people had sort of an awareness of that. We'll be doing A, B, C, D, F grading. A's are going to be basically just ultra premium cards, either super efficient removal or game-winning bombs that just can kind of carry the game by themselves. There are a lot of legends and rares that fit into this category, but there are also a number of commons and uncommons actually that can kind of get into here too. Some examples from set 1 were Twin Brood, Sauropod, and Annihilate would be some that I would say that fit into the A category. B's are cards that you're pretty happy to first pick. Very solid role players. You have strong incentives to be in that faction, but are not quite like all will win the game by themselves. A lot of removal spells will fit into here. So you have something like Awakened Student and Torch from set 1, I would say fit into this category. For the C's, we're looking at things like basically solid role players. This makes up the majority of the average draft deck. None of these cards are the sorts that you're going to look at and say like, holy crap, I got these. But you want to have more C pluses than C minuses in your deck. Granite Acolyte and Tower Top Patrol are some of the ones that we identified as falling into this category. Then you have D's, which are kind of playable. You can use them to fill out a hole in your curve, but you're really looking to avoid them whenever possible. Some of the ones that we identified was the Atarkadon, the 5/6 for 7 or whatever, and then Centaur Outrider. These are just inefficient. A lot of them are just kind of inefficient.
So bad we don't know how to say their name.
Yeah. Pretty forgettable stuff. And then the Fs are really reserved for cards that are remarkably bad. So things like Trail Stories and Detain basically just have no place in draft, and you really are harming your deck by putting it in over like a basic sigil for the most part. Mm-hmm. So those are some of the gradings. Did you have anything to add to that?
Just I guess one thing to clarify with grading, when giving something a letter grade, are we going under the assumption that it's like pack one kind of pick one scenario, we're totally open, or for say especially the multi-faction cards, should we grade them assuming we're already in that faction?
Well, we'll have to. I think that for the mono-faction ones, we'll just generally assume that it's pack one, pick one sort of situation.
Yeah. Because like multi-faction cards could naturally just be like a slightly lower grade, and I don't know if I should bake that in or not. If we didn't talk about this, and I just thought about it.
Yeah, well, I think that's a good consideration. It was actually something I meant to mention as well. I think that if we have to add context to it, like for instance, we'll see some cards that we'll say, yeah, this is really good in a specific kind of deck, but I really wouldn't want to be first pecking it or whatever.
Yeah.
When we get to those sorts of points, we'll be adding that nuance hopefully in the discussion. But in general, we'll just kind of have the default grade as being a pack one pick one situation.
Okay, that makes sense because like in our example, we said Awakened Suit was a B, and basically if it wasn't a multi-faction card, it'd be an A, right? So
that's a good point.
Close to it. So I think. Baking in a little bit of a negative on some multi-faction cards. Awaken Soon, because it's a 2-drop, is really why. Like, there's certain multi-faction cards that cost 6, and you don't really care that they're multi-faction at that point, depending on their influence requirements. So, or if we come across a certain heart card that might get a large grade despite how hard it is to cast anyways.
Yeah, I'm pretty sure that'll make it to the A category.
Yeah.
So with that, how about we get started? How does that sound?
Yeah. Well, I was thinking maybe at first I would go over the context of the format and how it's feeling so far because we've drafted it, but honestly, that'll just come up in conversation as we talk about literally every card in the set. So yeah, we'll do that. You'll find it out as we go through here.
Actually, the one thing that I would wanted to bring up of that context, we are going to definitely mention that as we move along about how it's been feeling. Oh yeah, so there's the how we draft it, which is the pattern is pack 1 is set 2, and then pack 2 is set 1. So they're kind of going in opposite directions. Of you're getting passed 2 by one person for all of the set 2 cards, and then like pack 3 again is set 2, and then set 1 once again. So all of your set 2 cards are coming from one direction, and all of your set 1 cards are coming from a different person. So it means that the signaling ends up being a little bit more complicated, I think, in this format compared to the previous one. We'll probably get into that in a little bit more detail in another spot. But one of the things that also entails is actually the color, like the level of splashing, I think has changed from the previous format. So how does this sound for set 1? It was, I would say, roughly half the time you were 2 faction, 25% of the time you were 2.5 faction, and 25% of the time you were 3 faction or more. Is that roughly correct?
It's probably correct, yeah. I mean, I might have splashed more than people, and there were certain parts or times in the format where it was easier to get fixing and you could get greedier, but over the length of it, it was the majority of your deck should have been 2 faction. Yeah.
And then I think that with this format, it's going to be closer to 1/3, 1/3, 1/3, just as a guess.
Yeah, so far I've actually played a decent number of 2 faction decks without having to go to 3rd, but I don't know if that'll hold. This is a tricky one to figure out. I think you're definitely going to end up in 3 faction decks more than you did before. I think that I would agree with. The exact split of it is yet is hard to figure out still. I still haven't quite landed on that. But it actually is possible to make 2 faction decks, and maybe more so than I initially thought going into it. But yeah, you're still going to end up in 3 faction quite a bit.
Sounds good. So now we will actually get into the cards. We will be able to get started. We'll talk about our first card. We have the adorable little Firemane Cub. Can you tell us about her?
Yeah, Firemane Cub is obviously it's a fire card. We're starting off with the fire commons, uncommons, rares, and legends here. And this is a 1/1 for 1 power and 1 fire influence. And it's an elemental beast that says summon. Deal 1 damage to an enemy unit. So, yeah, it's just like a utility one drop. It can come down and ping another thing. It's kind of like a temper almost, but instead of being a fast spell that gives something +1/+1 eventually, it's already a 1/1 up front.
So this feels a little bit low impact to me.
Mm-hmm.
So I my personal guess is somewhere like D plus. Like I'm not really excited about this. I think the temper is probably better.
Temper is probably better, and I also think temper is worse in this format.
Okay, sure.
From my experience so far, like aggro is just less of a thing, and there's just not many things to ping anymore. It just feels like I actually had this in a draft, and in like the 5 or 6 games I played with it, it never killed anything. Just actually sat in my hand and did nothing. Now that was probably a really extreme case, but yeah, I was not super happy with it, to say the least. It's I think D plus or even D might be correct. Maybe somehow the format shifts in a way where it gets better. I mean, you can still use it to uptrade, but the 1/1 body it leaves behind just isn't really any good. At the moment that I can tell.
But it's so cute though.
It is cute, but yeah, I would say this is probably worse than temper in this format, and I don't think that's a great place to be. But
D or
yeah, like a D, but A+ art.
So now we have Forge Wolf. This is a common. It's a 1/1, and it has summon, deal 1 damage to the enemy player, and of course it just costs 1 and a fire influence. I don't think that you will ever have the density of spark cards in your deck to justify playing this. I was trying to think about this the other day of like what deck composition you could possibly want that would make this playable, but I just don't see it.
Yeah, you'd have to be incredibly aggressive, and even then, like, I feel like you would want better 1-drops than this one in there. I just think this is also like a D- or something. Like, it's just not.
Yeah.
I just don't think it's any good or what you want to be doing in this format.
Agreed. Hidden Shiv is our next card. This is a 1-cost, 1 fire influence, +1/+0 weapon. Not very high impact, and we've definitely been low on weapons in our previous reviews, especially those that are low impact. But this one has warp.
Yeah.
So the question is whether this is closer to Spiked Helm, or is this closer to Ornate Katana for less? I'm personally tempted to say that it's closer to Ornate Katana, because it's really easy to fit that 1 into your curve. Mm-hmm. And we're talking a lot about how warp cards feel and how warp cards are, they have this situational element to them, and you're kind of forced to play them in order to actually get the card draw effect. So it's a weird tension there. But warp really rewards low cost cards because you can play them with other cards in the same turn, and it's not going to be distorting your plans as much. And if the cards are more expensive, then they have to stand on their own. Mm-hmm. And not you can't value the warp nearly as much. Because this is basically free, I think this is really close to Ornate Katana, unless you're drawing it in your opening hand.
Right, and that is a big unless, but maybe not as big as you think. You have something like I should have done the math, but I don't have it in front of me. But let me pull that up. But with warp, anytime it's not in your hand, it's actually a good thing. Once it's in your deck, at some point you can find it and play it, and that's awesome. All right, let me see here. 7/1. Sorry. There we go. Okay, yeah, it's about a 15% chance. If you have 1 copy of a card in your deck, in a 45 card deck, it's got about a 15.5% chance of being in any opening hand. So keep that in mind when evaluating warp. But it also still costs 1. It's not 0, so you still have to fit in your curve when it does show up, and that can be a pain. The other issue with this is that it's a weapon that's in fire, and I don't know if those are as good now. Depending on the decks that are showing up, I haven't found necessarily, if you have quick draw units, it's good and stuff like that. or flyers. Like, it can still work in, say, Skycrag, just throwing it on a random flyer just to get an extra point of damage over time. But I just in my experience with the format so far, it's really hard to find where the weapons matter at the moment in Fire. I think I will figure it out eventually, but right now it's been a struggle. So even if Hidden Shiv is close to Ornate Katana, I don't know what deck wants it yet, is the other problem here. So ultimately, it's just so low impact. Yeah, it can cantrip, which is nice, but giving +1/+0, it is relevant. I just don't know if it's worth the risk right now. So I'm hoping I'm wrong, but right now I'm going to give this like a D+. Like, I just don't think it's that good and limited. I think it'll have constructed impact though.
I think that D+ sounds a little bit harsh to me. I would say C-, but it's still pretty close. Yeah. Not something that you're excited to play in your deck, but it could be a reasonable curve filler in some types of decks, especially those that are very aggressive.
Yeah.
Next, we have On the Hunt. This is one that I think is going to be really hard to evaluate correctly on the first try. It is a 1-cost spell that puts a 4/4 Hellhound with charge on top of your deck. So I feel like kind of the idea behind this is that you play this on turn 1, and then on turn 2, you draw the 4/4 charger, you play it, and then you maul your opponents to death with it. This is a strange card in the sense that it actually is card disadvantage, because you're basically skipping your next draw step in order to have access to this card. So but at the same time, turn 2 4/4 charge, that's really scary. And that's going to kill a lot of people. So what was your take on this one?
All right, a couple things to know here. The Hellhound does cost 2, so you need 2 power to play.
Yeah, it costs 2.
Also, the spell's rare. You're not going to see it often, but it is it is a rare. But you'll see it once in a while. Actually, you'll probably see it often because people will pass it, or they won't because they'll overrate it. I don't know. Well, I really hate card disadvantage. That's my impression of it. But it is an incredibly aggressive card. But again, the caveat there is if it's in your opener. And we just talked about how every card kind of has about a 15% chance to be in your opener. So this card's giving you maybe a 15% chance essentially to be way ahead in a game, but you at the cost of going down a card. That's not the card I'm interested in drafting. That's just I usually like consistency rather than, spiky, try and randomly win the game cards, and I think this falls into that latter format. So I will play this card eventually because I do dumb things, but I would advise against drafting or playing this card. I'm actually just going to give this I'm not going to give it an F, but I'm going to give it a D-.
Yeah, I was going to say too that for me, my inclination is D range, because it's so risky, and just the fact that it's not like you discard a card from your hand and you get to play it. It's the fact that you also have to wait the turn. So it's something that if you're drawing this, even in the this is the beginning of the mid game, turn 3, turn 4, the fact that you can't just discard a card to get the 4/4 means that the card disadvantage, and the tempo awkwardness, both really manifest there. So although I'm sure this is definitely going to kill some people really quickly when you get it in your opening hand, I'm not feeling this one. Pummel is next.
All right,
tell me about it.
Pummel is a 1-cost. We're still in the 1-cost fire fast spell, and it reads: give one of your attacking units +2/+2 this turn. Look at the top card of your deck. You may put it on the bottom. So a couple things to note here. It's a combat trick. It's the first combat trick we've seen. Can only be used on attacking units. In Fire, I think you can live with that condition. But it also has this line of, look at the top card of your deck, you may put it on the bottom. For those that have played Magic or not played Magic, we'll probably mention this as Scry a few times, because this is essentially Scry 1, where it gives you... you just get to look at the top card of your deck and decide, do I want to draw this next turn or the next time I draw a card? Yes or no. And it's a seemingly tiny effect, but it adds up. getting your overall card quality and smoothing out the your draws is it adds up very quickly. Do not underestimate that effect.
Yeah, this is definitely a the scry effect is very, very useful, and we see a cycle of these in the set that we're going to be talking about over the course of the set review. Just smoothing out your draws is so nice and limited, where card advantage and card quality is really important. A lot of games are decided by who floods out, and this helps there. +2/+2 is really close to +3/+3, which is what we saw with Finest Hour. Yes, this is only on attacking, but that's not the end of the world. I think this is like probably a C+.
Yeah, I was actually thinking of maybe even putting it in the low B range. Like Finest Hour ended up being one of the best Justice cards in the last set. Rapid Shot was so good it got nerfed. Maybe that was more for constructed reasons. And this isn't Rapid Shot, but it's, now that Rapid Shot's been nerfed, it's actually not that far off. Where you mostly are only using it. This one you can literally only use while attacking. Rapid Shot you could actually use defensively, but you never really wanted to anyways. And yeah, the scry on top of it is just excellent. I think this card's really good. It's much harder to get good combat tricks in this format now, and I think that's maybe why it's tougher to get an aggressive deck going. But fire decks might not be all in super low curve aggro decks anymore, but they're still going to be aggressively tilted the majority of the time, and this card will be key in helping that or fueling that aggression. I think this is a pretty important card to pick up. So I'm actually going to put it in like I'm going to graduate it to B- for now, just based on my impressions so far.
Seems fair. Now we have Young Gun. This is another 1/1 for 1 with minor upside. We have not been very enthusiastic about the other ones we've seen so far, so I think this falls into the same category as like, D- or something.
Well, this one has quick draw, so it is significantly better than Forge Wolf and Firemane Cub, I would say. Just because it does wear weapons and buffs and such, at least.
Sure.
It can't be blocked by other X1s, like 2/1s or 1/1s that are around, but then, yeah, it can stop by every single 2/2 until you put something on it. So if you've got a deck full of Smith's Hammers that we're about to see in Hidden Shivs, maybe it's good. Maybe that's a deck, like, if Young Gun is so undervalued, you can get 3 or 4 of them and, like, do some weird build-around Fragile Voltron deck that ends up being good. I wouldn't be surprised, but at the moment I agree I'm going to stay away from it. But I'll at least give it a D+ for now.
That's fair.
Elevated above the other bad 1-drops. Like it is quite a step above, say, Forge Wolf. At least in terms of what it can end up doing. Like I think I may be underestimating it, but for now, I'll stay away until I see what can happen with it. I wouldn't be surprised, like 3 months from now, as the format matures, that it actually becomes some sort of staple of a weird archetype. I just don't know what that is yet. I haven't wasted enough gold to figure it out yet either.
Yeah, that would be interesting if that ends up happening, but definitely, unless you're going really deep, I wouldn't prioritize something like this. Now we have Blink Wolf. This is our first 2-drop. This one is one that certainly has very interesting ranked applications, which I am certain that we're going to talk at length about at some point in the future. But how do you feel about this for draft?
I love this in draft.
Okay.
A 2/1 for 2 isn't great, but I love 2-drops that are acceptable in the early game and acceptable in the late game, and that's what Blink Wolf is. It in the late game, if it's on top of your deck, you just get it off there, and it's just on the battlefield, no questions asked. You didn't really lose out on card advantage. And in the early game, a 2/1 for 2 is an acceptable play. It's not amazing, but again, it's not going to happen too often. There are going to be times where it's like awkwardly fitting in the middle of the curve, like say, I finally hit 5 power and I want to play my 5-drop, and now Blink Wolf's on top of my deck, and this is a little awkward. But I think this is the kind of card that I love to play in draft. Just 2-drops that are never really bad to see, and that's what Blink Wolf is. Yeah, I guess it's, sometimes a 2/1 literally doesn't add anything to the board, but again, it's not costing you a card in those situations. And early on, it's going to trade for a card if you play it on turn 2, so you're still never really down a card with it. So I actually like this card in draft. It's not a bomb or anything, but it's gonna be hard to find a better 2-drop than this in Fire.
And it's like a C plus, I think, right? Probably what you would grade it at?
Yeah, where it's just above average role player, something like that. Yeah.
Yeah. And I think that also it's one thing I would say that's important for this card is don't think about this as an aggro card. I think people often see high power, low toughness cards for draft, and they think that these all go into aggro decks. If anything, I think this is more of a mid-range card because it's closer to Temple Scribe than it is to Oni Ronin. So in that respect, like, don't take these early and think that you're going to be beating down with them, because they're really not going to do that much damage on offense, but they're much better blockers than they are attackers.
Okay.
So yeah, next,
Blink Wolf. Good guy.
Blink Wolf.
Good boy.
Yes.
Very good boy.
Yes. Good doggo. So now we have Smith's Hammer. This is one that you're talking about a little bit earlier of going in that Young Gun deck. This is a 2/0 weapon with Overwhelm for 2 and 1 Fire Influence. This feels very... what was the one from, like, the hatchet from set 1?
Oh, yeah, like Heavy Axe or something?
Heavy Axe. Yeah. This is more expensive than that. Has Overwhelm, which is an okay bonus, but it has less toughness, which is a really big downside. This is close to unplayable.
Yeah, this looks pretty bad. It doesn't. Yeah, if your deck is all quick draw units, I guess it's good. But
yeah,
outside of that, you can like enable Spark with this, but you're throwing away like a card essentially to do it. Yeah, it's a way to buff up flyers, but again, it's not buffing up their health. It's just giving it 2 attack and Overwhelm. I guess it's a way to push through damage in the late game, like a bad Rampage, essentially. But
it's a really bad Rampage.
It just sounds like a lot of bad things all in one card. I am not sold on this at all.
Yeah, I'm going to go straight up F with this one.
Sure. F's fine. Maybe F+.
Now we have Granite Ring. This is part of a cycle that we're going to be talking a lot more about, I think, in some of the later set reviews. So this one here is 3. They're all 3 cost, and then they're each of their individual influences. This one's obviously fire, and it has the ability once per turn you may pay 3 to give your units +1 attack and overwhelm this turn. I think that the ring cycle in general is very good, but this is probably the worst one. Because since this isn't giving your units any health bonus, it doesn't really make your trades that much better. So unless you have your opponent almost dead, I don't think this does very much. And if you have your opponent almost dead, and you're planning to get into that position a lot, you're an aggro deck, and you don't really want 6 cost awkward rally thing, in your deck. So I feel like this card is in an awkward place for the format.
Yeah, this feels like a like you said, a finisher, right? Like in Fire, your opponent's almost stabilizing, and then the ring comes down, and you push through one of your units at a time or something like that, giving them 1 attack and overwhelm. Okay, that's fine. It's a role to play. I don't want to grade this lower than it should be because it's the worst ring. Like just because the other rings might be better doesn't mean this card is bad. It just means it's worse than some other very good cards, which is fair. Lots of cards are worse than good cards. I haven't really had a lot of experience with fire decks yet, other than I've lost. But I think this, just because it has this repeatable effect, it's almost like a weapon you can move around. It's a bad weapon, but
sure. And
you have to pay 3 for it every turn, and there's 3 costs. Like, there's a lot of hoops jumping through here. But it gives all of your units +1 in overwhelm, which is a pretty strong effect, actually.
Yeah.
Like
Well,
I don't want to underrate that effect. Like if you're swarming, it's really good there. Like if you're Praxis and you have warp units all over the place, a couple 1/1 flyers in spots, this is going to play a really strong role in that deck. And if you have a lot of units with large attack or just large units, towering Terrazons, stuff like that. Like in Praxis, I think this card is really really good. It's how good is it in other decks, like maybe Stone Scar or I don't know. I think in every deck that's fire based and aggressive, you're going to be pretty happy to play this card.
really?
I do. I'm like not super insanely happy, but happy enough. Like yeah, it's not overrun. Let's not like go crazy here.
No.
But the fact that you can do it one turn and then the next turn, I see where this is good. I think this is at least like playable. It's not a bad card. I don't think this is a bad card.
Oh yeah, I'm not arguing this is unplayable.
Yeah.
I guess the thing for me is so something we're probably going to talk about a few times over the course of this set review as a concept referred to as the quadrant theory. It's something that comes up in limited resources a lot. It's a really useful tool. That limited resources, by the way, is a podcast that's dedicated to Magic the Gathering Limited. And draft especially. It's the idea that you have basically four kind of ideas in the game, or like spaces in the game. One is when you're developing, like the early stages of the game. One is when you're at parity, very similar board states. One is when you're ahead, and one is when you're behind. And you want to assess cards in each of these quadrants, and a card has to be at least very good in one, if not, hopefully, good in multiples of them. And the quadrant that is probably the most important is when you're behind. This card is terrible when you're behind, and it's terrible in the developing stages. It's pretty good in the other two, but those are probably the least important.
Right.
All this being said, this is actually like a long-winded way of me saying kind of like,
yeah,
I think this is like a C-,
yeah,
or D+.
I would put this closer to like C or C+, but we're not far off there. I do love quadrant theory, but I think something to keep in mind with it is that while it's pretty good overall at evaluating cards, fire is weird.
Yeah, sure.
Fire is generally like every card in fire is like if you're behind, you're dead anyways. So
yeah, fair.
Like Cloud of Ash completely fails the quadrant theory, and I played that in draft like several times in fire decks and stuff. And this is better than Cloud of Ash.
Okay, I'll take that.
Yeah.
Let's talk about Grenade then. So this is a 3-cost, 1 fire influence. Sacrifice a unit to deal 3 damage to an enemy unit and 3 damage to the enemy player. This is a lot like Burnout, except it hits both the player and a unit as opposed to just one or the other. But it also is at slow speed, which I think is a really big downside for this kind of effect.
Yeah, not being able to sacrifice your own unit in response to like a removal spell like you could with Burnout is a drawback to it. It's also not doing, instead of doing, like Burnout is just the clear comparison card here, right? The 4-cost fast spell, sacrifice a unit, deal 5 to either a unit or to the face, and that card was decent. It actually used to cost 3 and they nerfed it. This one though does more damage overall, but it's split up. It can't kill a large unit that has 5 health. It can only kill things with 3, but it does incidental damage to the face. Again, it costs 3 instead. I am not a huge fan of this card. There's just too many strikes against it. I think it either needs to cost less for me to be happy to play it, or it needs to be fast at this cost for me to be happy to play it. The fact that I have to like have a unit around that I'm happy to sacrifice and then only get 3 damage to the face and to a unit, like that means sometimes my 2/2 will kill a 3/3, but I have to invest another card in order for that to happen. That doesn't sound great to me. The 3 incidental face damage isn't nothing. I'm not sold on that being very good. I don't know. Maybe in really aggressive decks, you'll play it as a way to finish off your opponent, but I feel like you have a lot of options to do that. So that's ultimately like not very important. So I'm gonna give this a D+. It just doesn't seem.
That's exactly what I was going to say.
Yeah.
That's exactly what I was going to say. Okay. Hip Shot. This is a 3-cost, 1 fire influence warp card that deals 2 damage. We talked actually a little bit about this earlier when we first were seeing warp in the podcast, and that basically a lot of warp cards are going to be good in draft because you just want card advantage so badly, and especially fire decks, you just have very few ways to generate card advantage. This is one of them because it's a pseudo draw a card, deal 2. The fact that it's slow speed definitely hurts, but this seems like pretty good in a lot of cases, because if you are able to take out a 2-drop or a 3-drop with this, you're just like miles ahead. Like, I don't think this isn't the sort of thing that takes over games. I mean, it's just kind of a efficient small removal spell. But I think that puts it in something like the B- range.
Yeah. At 3 costs, deal 2 damage. You first think of, say, Alk Blast, but then you're like, oh, it's not fast, so maybe it's worse than Alk Blast. But then you see Warp, and you're like, all right, so Dispel and Alchemist Blast had a weird baby, and that's kind of where this falls into place. You know, Dispel always draws you a card and silences. Alk Blast does 2 damage. Okay, we figured it out. This is Hip Shot. And I like both those cards. I played Alk Blast and Dispel a lot. And yeah, I think this card's pretty good. I agree that it's around B- to B level. Yeah, one of the better cards you'll see in Fire.
Great. Let's talk about Jawbone Hatchet. Tell me about it.
Jawbone Hatchet is a 3-cost double fire influence requirement relic weapon. And it's a 1/1. That's not very good. But it has Spark +2/+2. So Spark is a mechanic you'll find, or a keyword you'll find in Fire and Primal cards, or Skycrag. And what Spark means is if the enemy player is taking damage this turn, the Spark card does something extra when you play it. So in this case, instead of being a 1/1 relic weapon, it becomes a 3/3 relic weapon, which is very good for 3.
Yeah, one of my issues with this, though, is the kind of the timing of it, because oftentimes I want to play my relic weapons before combat so that I can hit down a blocker and then pushing damage with my units. This is one that really wants you to play it after combat because of the spark effect, which has me kind of concerned.
Yeah, it's not an ideal play pattern, but at the same time, you're getting a pretty strong card after the fact. And sometimes what you can just do is if your opponent has like a larger unit, you end up suiciding one unit that was already useless anyway, another one gets through, and then this trades up. Or if it's really like if you're playing this on turn 3, a lot of times you'll just hit your opponent with whatever, and it'll just come down and dominate the game. So that's pretty nice. This card I at first didn't think was that good, but I've seen it now a few times in play, and it's played better than I expected. So I would actually give this around like probably about Hip Shot level, like around B-.
Wow.
And just the fact that it's a weapon, it can still receive buffs in other ways and trigger things elsewhere. It's nice. The double fire is also a concern though. But yeah, I've been impressed with this card.
I'm gonna put this closer to like a C. Honestly, I still need to be convinced. Somebody in the chat brought up that this interacts really well with Stash.
Yeah,
because if you bring this back, it gets the bonus again and again. So that's really, really sweet.
Yeah, Stash, and also there's a card coming up called Reforge, which
I
haven't played with yet, but I think that could be a strong deck.
Yeah, definitely. So it definitely has that combo potential, but I need to be convinced still on this one.
Right.
Sparkbot is up next. This is a 1/4 for 3 that has a spark ability of play a 1/1 Grenadin. I'm not really excited about this one because it's
Yeah.
I don't think that it has the same there's the same support for go wide decks in this set as there was in the last one. Not quite as many of the either sacrifice enablers or payoffs rather. You don't have rally as often, et cetera, et cetera. So I'm not really as excited for any sort of go wide deck. And that this is just, even if that was more popular, this is a lot worse than some other cards that are available.
Yeah, if somebody came up to me and said, "Hey, I'm gonna offer you old pre-buff Scaly Gruon and Fire with upside," I'd be like, "No, but what's the upside?"
Yeah.
And they're like, "A Grenadin," and I'd be like, "Yeah, you
A
can,
Grenadin maybe. A Grenadin maybe.
you can leave now. You can just get out of my house.
Yeah.
I'm not interested in what you're selling. And here's your D. Be on your way."
Yep, I agree. So definitely not excited about that. Next, we have a rare card that I would hope people do not try and play in draft. This is Stone Scar Excavator. It is a 3-cost relic. It has a lot of rule text. Once per turn, you may pay 4 and discard a power to deal 1 damage to the enemy player for each power card in your void.
Yeah.
So you have to pay 4 to not pay 3 so that you can pay 4 so that you can not affect the board.
Yeah. You're paying 7 power to do 1 damage.
Okay, so F next. Stone Shaker. Tell me about it.
Okay. Stone Shaker is a 3-cost 1 fire influence card. It's a 1/1 for 3. Not great. And it has summon. Reduce the cost of each unit in your deck by 1. I think this has some real constructed implications. I don't know if it has any draft implications.
Do not think so, no.
Yeah, it's a 1/1 for 3 is just not what you want to be doing. Yeah, the rest of your units get cheap, but because of the way the draft format is, where you're only drafting Omens of the Packs and in Omens of the Past in pack 1 and 3, it's not like you can even get such a high density of warp cards that somehow you'll like be able to just dump your deck with Stone Shaker or something like that. Yeah, it's like a pseudo ramp card where some of your future draws will be cheaper, but is there like some fire deck that I'm not aware of that's playing like a bunch of like 7-cost units? I just don't see it. It doesn't even reduce the cost of the units in your hand. So if
that's massive to me.
And that's the real issue with this in limited is like even if you wanted it to reliably ramp out some of your more expensive units, they might already be stranded in your hand, and this is doing nothing. So it's a 1/1 for 3 with just not enough upside.
So F, I would have to say, right? This is pretty close to an F.
Yeah, you'd have to have some really weird deck to play this, but I'm pretty happier and I feel safe in giving it an F for limited. Again, constructed. I'm already playing it in constructed and doing dumb things with it, but this is not constructed. This is limited.
Now we have Twin Barrel. This is a 3-cost 1 fire influence weapon that gives double damage. This is an uncommon. Double damage is a lot of damage.
Can be, yeah.
It can be. You have to, I think, with a card like this, be in a very particular kind of deck for you to want it, because your units themselves have to be relatively big for the double damage, like as a base. They have to already be big. You have to have a lot of 4/4s and 5/5s. A lot of big overwhelm, duders to really be interested in something like this. So far, and you'll see moving forward too, fire doesn't have a big density of that by itself.
Okay.
Maybe you get more of that if you're in something like a Praxis deck. I feel like this has a lot of upside, though. I don't know.
Yeah, this is a card I want to figure out where it's good, because I haven't gotten a deck yet where I've wanted it, but this just seems so potentially powerful. I've done some obscene things with Righteous Fury, which was a card in the first set that gave double damage, and that also gave Life Stealing was a fast spell, but it was also 2 faction, yada yada. This is on a weapon. Double damage, it's important to note, yeah, it's nice on Overwhelm, but another form of evasion is flying. If you end up in a primal deck, you can just throw this on a Sky Snapper, and it might get there, it might not. Or you put it on quick draw units, and that is a way to actually buff up their health, not just their attack, right? You might not want to put this on a Young Gun, but if that Young Gun deck shows up and you put one weapon on it, and it's now like a 3-1, and then you make it a double damage quick draw 3-1, like that's actually impossible to block. You can still kill it with removal spells. So double damage is really nice on quick draw units or evasive units. It's not good on just 1-1s and 2-2s though. And they're just, like, again, this weird Young Gun deck that I have in the back of my head that I'm trying to speculate on, that's really one of those classic, we didn't see it much in the last draft format, but just because it was so deep, but sometimes you'll get a draft format where you can build an actually good deck with a bunch of really bad cards. And this might be a key piece into that deck. Like, if everybody thinks Young Gun and Twin Barrel suck, and you can just get them later and fill in your deck with better cards early on and get these late in a pack, there might be something there. But again, for now, I think it's better to be on the side of wait until we can prove that and just call this not a great card, or maybe not even a good card, just because I think it's just asking for a lot right now. So I'm going to start this at, like, I'm still going to give it at least kind of a high grade, just because it has the word double damage on it, but this is probably higher than I should be just because I'm too optimistic. I'm going to give it a C-. Like, that's probably too high, but I don't know. I'm hopeful.
I'll err on the side of not really believing as much that this in this deck.
Yeah.
Putting it at a D+. It's a weird card. And I think that more trial will be necessary in order to prove it's the proof of concept. But definitely, it's one to keep your eye on compared to most cards that are in that range, because maybe this could be one that surprises us.
It'll be good on this next card, or it'll be terrible on this next card, depending on what happens. Because we've got Audacious Bandit here. It's the first of our 4-power fire cards, and there's actually a couple of good ones at 4 power. But this one's 4 power, 1 fire influence, 4/2, but it has Spark. So if you spark your Audacious Bandit, it gets Quick Draw. Becomes a 4/2 Quick Draw for 2 if you've dealt damage to your opponent this turn and then play it. That's so let's evaluate this. 4/2 for 4, not so great. Kind of dies everything. 4/2 Quick Draw for 4 is excellent. That is a card that is really hard to stop if you're being aggressive. And in the worst case scenario, like the nice thing to evaluate here with Spark on this card is, okay, if you're ahead, that means you're getting Spark, you're hitting your opponent, and now you get a 4/2 Quick Draw for 4, and you can continue to be aggressive. If you're behind, it's still a 4 strength 4-drop, which can block a lot of units. It's going to die as well, but the thing it's blocking is also probably going to die. So it's never really that bad. And there's a lot of spots where it's great, like just ends the game. This is what we want to put weapons on, right? That we've been talking about. So I think this is probably one of the key cards to fire decks working in the new format, and I'm gonna give this a B-.
Yeah, I would definitely say that this is one that is an important card. Fire is looking really aggressive. It was really aggressive for a lot of decks in set 1 as well. I feel like you want to put some effort into making sure that you have the enablers for this, that you're playing enough 1, 2s, and 3s that this consistently be sparked when it comes into play. But if you're able to do that consistently, that sounds like a pretty mean beatdown deck. So I'm going to say C+. I'm a little bit more tepid on it than you are, because I'm just not super excited about fire overall.
Yeah.
But definitely, if fire decks work, this will be a part of them.
Yeah, I'm more basing my, like, right now my impression of fire is I am bad at drafting fire, and that probably Direwolf Digital knows more about balancing the draft format than I do at this point, and I need to just figure it out. So I'm like, even though I haven't been impressed at all with fire yet, I'm putting that more on, I'm putting the negative score on me. I'm giving myself an F rather than all of these cards.
Sounds good. All about giving you Fs. Okay. Granadin Canyoneer. This is a 5/1 for 4 and 1 fire influence, and has the Spark. Put a firebomb in your enemy player's deck. I think that if you're valuing that Spark card, that Spark clause, you're doing it wrong.
Yeah.
A, it's not going to come up all the time of just being able to spark it, and B, it also has the condition they have to draw the firebomb at any point in the game for it to make a difference, and then C, that 5 damage has to even make a difference. Like, it has like 3 layers or something like that of conditionality to it. So really at its core, this is a 5/1 for 4, and that's not even close to good enough.
Yeah, yeah, that's not good. Maybe if I knew my opponent had like 15 warp cards in their deck, I would
Yeah.
maybe give this a D minus instead of like, or D instead of a D minus. But no, it's just not good. It's a 5/1 for 4, which actually just makes it like an okay blocker against large units, but miserable against every other unit. But I just don't want to play this. I will give it an A plus for art though. That Grenadin that's in the cannon with the thumbs up is spectacular.
He's the hero that we all deserve.
Yeah, that's like absolutely amazing. But no, not looking to play this card. Just not doing it.
Next, we have Groundbreaker. This one looks okay in draft. This is a 3/6 for 4 with triple fire influence, which is pretty rough. But it has the enemy player can't gain life, so that craps on a lot of decks in the format. Yeah. Nice cards. Yeah, nice 1/1 for 1, et cetera, et cetera. And then has spark double damage.
It's
that
yeah,
dangerous.
Yeah, it's important to note this is a rare.
Yes,
which might be surprising that it's not a legend, but but that's okay. The triple fire does limit what decks it can go into, but boy, what a payoff! Holy cow! A 3/6 for 4 is already decent, and the enemy player can't gain life shuts down like an entire draft archetype. Yeah. And even if it's not, it's still incidentally nice. And then that if you get the spark, it's just this is insanity. If you like then untap with this in play and get to attack with it, and you have any sort of thing to give it overwhelm or whatever, the enemy is dead. The enemy is dead. Like this card will just end the game. And in the meantime, it can just block everything and kill everything. And even if you don't spark it out, it's just totally acceptable. The biggest drawback on it, though, is that triple fire. But if I see this pack one, pick one, I'm just taking it. Like, I don't even care that it's triple fire influence. I'm just going to do it.
Yeah, and it is worth, though, that like now you have to, you slant your deck that at least 2/3 of the power in your deck has got to be fire. You generating.
Yeah.
You can't splash anymore. You're now a 2-faction or like 1.5 faction deck. But if you are able to land this on turn 4 with spark, I just can't see you losing very many games with that.
Yeah, you're basically looking at trying to hit at least 10 sources of fire influence in your deck, if not more. So.
Yep.
Which is doable. There's strangers all over the place. Like you might end up valuing like or valuing 2-drop strangers that just have fire influence in their cost like a bit higher, just as 2/2 for 2, where their upside is you get to cast Groundbreaker sooner. But it's this card is just insane.
Yeah, easy A for this one, I think.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
So Library Phoenix. This is a weird one. Very interested to see the implications in ranked. I have to think about this card more. So it is 4 cost, double fire influence for a 2/2. At the start of your turn, reduce the cost of non-unit cards in your hand by 1. Mm-hmm. And then it has the ability of +3 attack and flying while you have no cards in hand. Mm-hmm. So this has the possibility of being a 5/2 flyer for 4, but it's rarely going to get that until pretty deep into the mid game, if not the late game. It reduces the cost of non-power cards in your non-unit cards in your hand by 1, but a lot of your cards are units anyway because this is draft.
Yeah, but it is nice that it's non-unit cards. It doesn't say spells. Like it's reducing your weapons and your spells, which is pretty cool.
That's cool.
That's like a lot of cards. I don't know. Like it's a 2/2 for 4 up front isn't so horrendously bad that I'm gonna like I think the upside is enough to make up for that. I've played plenty of other 2/2 for 4s in this format so far, and the games are slower. I like this card in draft. I'm a pretty big fan of it. It's not Groundbreaker by any means, but I think this will be. You have to answer it. It's easy to answer, but you do have to. And in the meantime, you'll get some amount of value out of it. There's some expensive spells that'll get reduced in cost. I think this will always at least the vast majority of the time, I think it'll reduce at least one card in cost, and even then, that's like something. And it will eventually get flying. You just know that. It's not like, well, you might eventually meet the condition. Like your hand will be empty at some point in the game, and in those situations, this card just like totally is huge. It's a 5/2 flyer for 4. That's great.
I'm less excited than you are. I find this. I'm gonna have to play with this in order to be a believer.
There's a lot going on here. I'm not going to disagree with that, but I just think in your average limited game, it's going to be good. Like, is it an A? No, I don't think it's an A, but I'm going to give it a B. Like, I think it's just above some of the other 4-drops we've seen.
Yeah. I don't know. I'm gonna say C plus for right now. I'm just gonna have to play with this in order to figure it out. Yeah, I think that the your volume went down. Can you speak for a moment?
Oh yeah, am I good?
Oh yeah, now
all right.
Yeah, you're back.
I'm looking forward to this reducing the cost of Granite Ring to 0, and then surprising my opponent out of nowhere by dropping it and activating it for 3. No, I don't know, but there's something there.
Yeah. Yeah, I'll C plus. I'll have to figure it out. This card is weird. Moving on though.
There's a lot going on.
Yes, yeah. Outlands Brute. This is a 4/1 for 4 and double fire influence. It has charge and warp, and when an enemy spell is played directly on Outlands Brute, he deals 2 damage to the enemy player. Neat little card. Definitely very aggressive. I feel like, with your heavy fire, like really devoted aggro decks, this is the kind of card that you want in your deck. I mean, sure, 1 power, 1 health units are not exciting. The fact that you can kind of draw a card off of this is exciting, and you are just there to kill people. So I guess this is fine there. The fact that you get the pseudo card draw is obviously an important part of this card too.
Yeah, the warp is big. That means in the late game, if this is lurking somewhere in your deck, it's just going to show up and swing the board in your favor. But it does cost 4. So again, this is one of those warp cards that are a bit harder to get the value out of warp all the time.
Yeah.
Like every time you add a point of cost to warp, you have to keep in mind you're less and less likely to actually be able to warp it out in the development stages, the early development stages. Like, there's a pretty big difference between a 3 cost card with warp and 4 cost card with warp in terms of how often you can warp it out early on.
Yep.
That being said, this is still pretty good. I think a 4/1 charge for 4, yeah, it's not great, but it's got some nice trinket text on it about being targeted by spells that it might do something. And I think warp is just so good in draft that I think it's enough to make this a pretty good card.
So what would you grade it as? I think I would have it as like a C plus.
Yeah, let's see. I gave like Audacious Bandit a B minus, and this is around that. I think it's about the same. Yeah.
Sure. Okay, Reforge. Tell me about it.
Okay, Reforge is a 4-cost spell, 1 fire influence requirement, and it says draw a weapon from your void. It gets +2/+2. This is a pretty wild card. It's like Dark Return, but for weapons. But instead of costing 1, it costs 4. But it also gets +2/+2. But +2/+2 is a lot, especially if it's a relic weapon. And even just a weapon that you put on a unit early, if you get it back and it's +2/+2, and you put that on a unit, that's huge too. So it's like some weird mashup of Smuggler's Stash and Dark Return, and costs 4. I mean, it seems a little expensive, but it ultimately probably isn't. This seems like pretty fairly cost and just really powerful. It's a kind of a tough condition to hit. Like, it feels like if you know you're in a deck with a bunch of weapons, Reforge is insane. And if you don't have a lot of weapons, Reforge is terrible. And so, like, this feels like a card that's either an F or a B, and there's really not much in between, and you've got to figure that out when drafting.
Yeah, this is kind of a build around you. There are, I think, a little bit fewer of good relic weapons in set 2 compared to set 1. But if you get something like even just a Stone Scar Maul, this is massive
Mm-hmm.
with that. So make sure that you have, I would say, um, 3 or 4 good targets for this, like heart targets that you're actually excited about getting,
Mm-hmm.
and you should be pretty happy with it. But don't be picking this in pack 1 thinking it's like, oh yeah, I'm going to go to some pseudo armory deck, because you're often not going to have access to
You
that.
might be able to make it work, but yeah, I think probably like what it can work in. Like if you're picking this, you're saying I'm either Stone Scar or I'm Mercano, right? You're
Yeah.
not saying you're one of the new faction pairs, really. You're saying you're one of the set 1 faction pairs, but then there's support still in pack 1 for it, right? There's the new Justice relic weapon that we'll get to. That's like a 2/2 relic weapon for 2. Like even that's fine to reforge at some point. Um, so yeah, so it's an odd card. I really don't even know how to grade it. Like I said, it's going to be either like an F or a B, and not much in between.
Yeah.
It's just, I guess it's going to be more towards like, I don't know. Do I just split the difference and say it's a C minus or a D for now? But in the right deck, it looks great.
I think I'm going to give it a C minus on the predicate that the average deck probably doesn't want this.
Yeah.
But if you do have, like, it's worth experimenting if you have the pieces for it.
Mm-hmm.
So let's move on to Swift Stranger. This is, each of the individual colors, factions rather, have uncommon strangers that have been introduced to the game. So more strangers to draft with and to play with in Constructed. This is a 3/3 for 4 and 1 fire influence, and strangers have charge. 3/3 charger for 4 isn't terrible.
That's really
as a base,
good, actually.
Yeah, like that's pretty solid.
That's real good.
So, and I do think that the strangers deck probably got better in this set.
Mm-hmm.
There's a couple of really interesting inclusions, especially at rare. So
yeah,
I'm tempted to just given the fact that the base rate on this is fairly solid, and that strangers deck looks pretty interesting. I'm tempted to give this just like a B minus.
Yeah, this is. I'm gonna give this actually even better than a B minus. I'm gonna give this like a B. I'm gonna up it a little bit more. I'm just keeping with the trend of me being slightly higher on fire than you. Yeah, the strangers deck did get better, but you got to be real careful with certain strangers when you put them in your deck, because your opponents are also gonna have more strangers than usual. I've got some fun stories about that, and we'll get to it as we tackle some of the other strangers that are around. But yeah, it's pretty great. So let's give it a B.
Now we have Thunderhoof Warrior. Tell me about this card.
Sorry, one sec. Okay, Thunderhoof Warrior is a 3/3 for 4 with Overwhelm, and it has Ultimate. Pay 6 to give Thunderhoof Warrior +2/+2. Now this is part of a mini cycle in this set. There is a whole cycle of common cards that have an ultimate that costs 6 to give them +2/+2. And Thunderhoof Warrior is the one in Fire. And I think they're all pretty good, and this one is also pretty good. 3/3 Overwhelm for 4 is slightly undersized, whatever his name is. I can't remember right now. The time 3/4 Overwhelm. That was okay. This is not that. We're in Fire instead of
Horned
time.
Vorlunk.
Yeah, Horned Vorlunk. That dude. But later on in the game, when you have 6 power, you can turn into a 5/5 Overwhelm, which is really nice. So you get a not super amazing but acceptable body up front, and then later on it becomes a really nice card, right? We played Xeon Guardian as a 3/3 endurance, and then that becomes an 8/8, which is quite a bit different than a 5/5. But still, for Fire, finding stuff to do with your power in the late game can be a struggle, and this is a nice spot to put it. It also wears combat tricks and weapons well because of Overwhelm, and can often be the thing that closes out the game for you. As we noted so far, though, Fire's got a lot of options at 4, and this is competing with Audacious Bandit sometimes in that slot, and I don't know which one's better yet. I want to say Bandit is, and Warrior's more for maybe a more mid-rangey, less aggressive style, and it's kind of a pick your flavor or pick what's available sort of thing. But I still think it's overall a pretty good card.
Yeah, I was definitely going to say that this is something that fits. We see parts of a super aggro, like really, really, blazing fast aggro deck that is going to come together infrequently, but when it does, it'll be really powerful. And then you have kind of a more mid-rangey Fire, Praxis, or something like that deck. And this fits really well into that second type and is much less exciting in that first type. Although you'll play it if it's, your last card,
right,
kind of thing. So overall, I mean, this is. It's a good common, but it's still kind of common power level. I'd say C+.
Yeah, C+ sounds just about right. Like, I guess going off what you were saying, this might be like more on the Praxis side of things, whereas Audacious Bandit's more on the Skycrag side of things or something.
Yeah.
But you'll play both in either if it's what you get.
Yep. Now, Dustblind. Tell me about it.
Dustblind. So 5-cost spell with Warp. Okay, but it says exhaust 2 enemy units. Ugh. Eesh. Yeah, not super excited about this one. It's like a bad Cloud of Ash, but it has Warp on it, so it costs 1 more. There might be decks that want this, but if you do, you'll get it plenty late that you don't need to pick it with any kind of priority. So I'm gonna give this. I could give it an F. But I'll give it a D-. It still has the word Warp on it.
Yeah, I mean, Warp is really powerful, but I'm actually going to give it an F partly because I think that Warp. Well, I mean, yeah, but I also think that Warp is especially bad on this kind of card because it is so situational.
Right.
Like you kind of want to set up for your Cloud of Ash. You want to set up for your rally turn or whatever. And, this falls into that same sort of category of that big burst damage turn. And when it just pops up on the top of your deck, a lot of times you have to be like, well, I need to set up for this more. I can't play this right now. It's not going to do anything on this board. I'm just going to deal 5 damage and they'll be at 15 still. So because of that, I'm much lower on this. No, I wouldn't say much lower on this card, but I'm low on this card.
Yeah, it's just if you need a finisher in Fire, this can be it. It's just a really, really bad one, and I hope you can find a better one.
I'm just gonna say don't play it.
Yeah. Avoid it at all costs.
Now we have Gun Down. This is deal 5 damage to an enemy unit, to a unit, not even an enemy unit, without quick draw. I like that little flavor note in there. Spell, not fast, and this is for 5 and 1 Fire influence. Mm-hmm. This is a pretty solid removal spell for Fire. They do not get very good removal spells for medium to large units. Mm-hmm. This isn't going to take out the large units still, but Fire doesn't get that. And instead, it's like kind of just a bad Death Strike at common.
Yeah, which is good. I think removal overall has gotten worse, and this card stood out to me as a pretty good removal spell. This will often be like your top end for Fire, where it's just clearing the way, getting their biggest blocker out of the way, and pushing you through. I had a game the other day where my opponent cast Gun Down on one of my units while I had Rapid Shot up, and I forgot to use Rapid Shot on my unit to save it because I'm bad. I just could have done it. So don't be me. Remember that interaction.
That's neat.
It was bad. I will never forget. At least I know. Yeah. At least I hope I won't. But
you learned the lesson now.
Using a Rapid Shot to save a unit from a burn spell doesn't sound intuitive, but it turns out now you can do it. Hey, great. Yeah, but it can't kill units with quick draw. Okay, it's worse, I guess, in the Fire mirror. But other than that, it's going to kill a lot of things, and you're going to be pretty happy to play even 2 or 3 copies of this spell in a draft, honestly.
Yep. I'm going to give this a B.
Yeah, super solid B.
Pit Fighter. It is back, and I'm going to say a little bit worse than before.
Really? Worse? Ooh.
That may be harsh. Pretty close.
It was already pretty bad.
It's pretty close. Okay, tell me about it.
Pit Fighter is a 5-cost Fire card. It's a 6/3 And it's got a big, nice blank text box. Nothing.
Got a big, nice set of abs, sir.
Oh yeah.
Do not respect that bod.
Well,
Keep it working to that.
It's really the helmet that's going on here. But yeah, 6-3 for 5 means at least it doesn't get blocked by random 2/2s that are around. But still, just total filler dude. Not anything amazing here.
Nope. I'm gonna put this as just classic D.
Yeah, it's filler. It can in a pinch hit things. If you give it overwhelm, it might actually kill something or your opponent. But yeah, just filler fatty for the top end.
Pouncing Drake. This is a 5-cost double fire influence 4/4 flyer at rare.
Yeah.
And it has warp. So as we noted earlier, cards that are more expensive are worse with warp because it means that you're more likely to draw them in your hand in the early turns of the game, and you can't play them with warp. This is a card that I would play 4/4 flyer for 5 all day long, especially in fire because they just don't get good flyers. So like I think that card by itself is probably about B- B range if it just didn't have warp on it at all. And if you warp this in the mid to late game, I think that you are going to win that game like 80% of the time or something like that. So this is a really powerful card in draft.
Yeah. It's also important to note that this is a fire card with flying.
Yeah.
Those are just rare. They literally are rare, right? This is a rare.
Yes, yeah.
The other flyer we saw in fire so far, also a rare. It's just really hard to find this kind of evasion in this faction, which makes it really that much more valuable. Cobalt Monument was a 4/4 flyer for 5. We've seen other 4/4 flyers for 5, and they were all just absurdly good in that format. And I think flyers are even better this time around. I'm going to go as far to say that this is actually like an A-. Just a big, efficient flyer in fire is just hard to find, and I think that makes it just really, really good.
100% agree. Just play this, pick this. It'll be absolutely great. And also, just like card advantage and flying are two things that fire does not get a lot of, and this gives you both. Now we have Stone Powder Heretic. This is a 5-cost, 1-fire influence 2/4 that has when Stone Powder Heretic attacks, double its attack this turn. As I pointed out in the set review for Constructed, if you give this double damage, it now has double damage, otherwise known as Canadian damage, which is an important feature. Right. So I just want a lot of people to be aware of that right off the top. So that's kind of where you want to go. But like this is the kind of card.
I also want to mention it's an uncommon. You didn't quite mention that. Got to try and get it in there before we talk about the whole card. But just so people are aware, it is an uncommon. But yeah.
Hey man, I wanted to get my joke in there. I love that I know. Joke. Gotta rep the double.
I know. Jokes are great, but we are supposed to also be informative here. All right, go on with your Canadian whatever you're doing right now.
So this is a card that, part of it, this could actually be a top end for that super aggro kind of deck because it wears buffs so well. If you give this something like the twin barrel and then you rampage it before combat, now you're just doing infinite damage or something crazy like this. Infinite, yeah. I'm sure that's how numbers work. It's kind of narrow. You don't want this in your average mid-rangey time deck, as part of like the Praxis stuff. But if you are going hard in that sort of direction, this is the kind of card that I would be interested in trying.
Yeah, it's got double damage essentially when attacking, and that's powerful. It means any combat tricks you're using aggressively get better. If it receives War Cries, is essentially doubling up on that. I know those are harder to find, but it still means something, and it's just going to wear any weapon you've got in your deck incredibly well. It looks like one of the better top-end kind of finishers for fire, especially in like the weapons matters fire decks that it looks like are trying to be a thing. It also is just like the biggest, buffest Oni I've seen on a card yet. Like that thing is like borderline ogre demon large thing, which I guess is what an Oni is. So hey,
Yep.
it's living up to it. You know, Oni Ronins went to the gym, came back, and got quite a bit more buff, and brought a cannon with him. Like, jeez, that thing is
Yeah.
crazy. So yeah. That being said, it's still a 5-drop, but it can block well, can attack well. I don't know. Still just B minus, like just slightly above average. Is it just C plus, something like that? Still, I don't know.
I honestly, I think I'm gonna have to give this a C, but that has the idea that in the right deck, it's going to go up a good deal. You have to be building around it a little bit, doing a little bit of work. But I think that in the average deck, it's closer to a C.
Yeah, it still needs, I guess, it doesn't need any work to make it really good. Like 4/4 for 4 on the attack, still fine. But yeah, the fact that it doesn't block well is a problem. It still costs 5. I can see where you're at.
Now let's talk about bad news. Go for it.
All right, bad news. This is a legend. It's a legendary 6-cost spell, double fire influence. It has warp. Okay, sure. And it says, ready your units. They can attack again. So, the way you play this card is you attack with your units. Your opponents block. All their units get exhausted. You use bad news, and your units that survive can attack again and essentially won't get blocked, because every unit that's blocked won't be able to block again. And ideally, your opponent dies. That is the ideal scenario. What can happen is you're behind, and instead you just never cast this card and you die. Those
also another possibility.
Those are the possible scenarios here. Being that you're in fire, scenario A is more likely where you're desperate to finish. But if all your units are smaller than their units, it's still not going to help you. All your units are just going to die and nothing's going to happen. So it's not helping in that regard. But it can be a lot of damage out of nowhere. That's for sure. But it might just be too inconsistent for draft. But there's no doubt about it. The effect is incredibly powerful.
One of the things that I would also point out to people who are familiar with these sorts of effects from Magic the Gathering is that the second combat is much more powerful in Eternal because of the tapped versus the exhausted system. In Magic, units that are untapped are able to block in both combats, while units that are exhausted after the first combat in Eternal are no longer able to block. So that second combat sort of effect is more powerful in Eternal compared to Magic the Gathering. This is a very hard card to evaluate. It'll definitely win some games out of nowhere. I think that if you are one of these really hyper aggro fire decks, you can play this as a top end card. But I guess also even with a mid-rangey one, you set up a giant board stall, you play it after you attack with everything, you deal 10 damage but lose half your board, and then you play this and you're able to finish off the game. So in that respect, it's powerful. The warp is basically not a thing because of that situational aspect that I talked about before. I guess if you get this off the top of your deck, you're just winning.
Yeah.
In a lot of games. God, this one's hard.
Yeah, it's a weird one. Like it is powerful, but it's really difficult to evaluate. I do like that it is mono fire. We've seen this effect before. It got removed from the game, but it was on a Rakano card. Now it's on just fire. It's pretty good. Man, in this format, there's so many board stalls happening, and again, I just don't have a lot of experience with fire decks. It seems like a good way to push through the final damage zone in an aggressive fire deck, but at the same time, 6 costs for that effect it's expensive, but not totally out there. I don't know. I'm gonna give it I don't even know. It's such a specific role player.
I'm gonna give it C minus just because
I'm gonna take it and find out every time I see, but I just like my grade's irrelevant because if I see it, I'm just gonna take it and figure it out. But yeah, I think C is fine to be with and just be like, I don't know. Let's find out. We'll revisit it.
Yes, definitely one worth revisiting. Cannon Bearer. This is a 6-cost 5/6 with double fire influence. It has warp, and it has summon, deal 1 damage to an enemy. The baseline of 5/6 for 6 summon, deal 1 damage to an enemy is actually a fine card in a lot of the mid-rangey fire decks. Um, so like that's fine. And this has warp. Now, once again, more expensive cards, warp is worse. But if you get this in the late game on the top of your deck, you're way ahead.
Oh yeah.
So all things considered, I think this is actually a very solid card in the mid-rangey fire decks, and might edge up into the B- range to me.
Yeah. Once again, this card is a common. It has a rarity on it.
Yeah, it does.
And
Common, good job for finding it.
Yep. And yeah, I agree with you on your assessment though. Just really solid. One of the better things you can have at the top of your curve in a fire deck. If you do ever warp it, you're just winning. It just is what it is. Like, I've had this warped against me twice, and I just felt like the worst piece of garbage ever. Every time, like both times it happened, I was just like, wow, okay, that's a thing that happened, I guess. So yeah, I think this card is not great, but pretty good. Pretty good. I mean, the format is slower, so you can afford to have more 6, 7, 8 drops in your deck now. I don't know if that's exactly where Fire wants to be, but I think you'll still see some mid-rangey Fire decks, and largely because Cannon Bearer is a card at common that you don't mind playing some number of.
Cool stuff. Okay, so you say B- as well?
Yeah. Also, I can't wait to play this on turn 5 Warp because of Sauropod Wrangler. That's going to happen in draft, and I'm going to win the game.
Now we have a legendary relic, Flame Stoker. This is a 6 fire influence. At the start of your turn, play an Infernus. Now, Infernus is a 5/5 overwhelm charge unit that dies at the end of turn. This is a really hard card to beat if you're able to land it in the game, because you're just like fireballing your opponent for 5 every turn. They have to have a 6 health blocker, or they are just going to die to this thing. And when they have that 6 health blocker, they can't do anything with it other than block every turn. And if it dies in any way, shape, or form, then now the Flame Sucker takes over the game. I think that you want this in a fairly defensive deck, which is weird for Fire. I don't think that you want this as like a finisher in a Skycrag deck. I think that you want this as a you're playing a Praxis deck, a lot of big fatties and stuff like that. You set up a board stall, you play this, and then you just bury your opponent in fireballs to the dome every turn. And if you get into that sort of state, I think that it's really hard to lose.
Yeah, this card seems like one you sort of build around. It's a 6-drop that has no immediate board impact, but it threatens to end the game pretty quickly. So, I'm going to say this is... It kind of fails the behind on board part of the quadrant theory, but it's so good in every other spot that it still warrants a pretty high grade. I'm going to go B+. Like, I just think this is a really powerful finisher. And also the premium looks awesome.
Yeah, this is one that also requires some play with it, because it has such a bizarre effect on the game. But it definitely has some very sickening upside. I'm gonna say B for it, because it does have narrow applications. You can play this in every deck, but if you build around this as your finisher, I think it'll be pretty impressive.
Yeah, it's Whispers in the Void-esque, except it ends the game quite a bit quicker, unless your opponent has a 6/6.
Yeah. How about you tell us about the next card?
This next card is wild. 7 cost, 1 fire influence, Burning Glaive. It's a weapon at common, so not a relic weapon, but a weapon, and whatever unit you attach it to gets +5 strength and +3 health, and nothing else. Just a whole lot of stats for 7. This is a wild one. I mean, if you have a unit, and at the stage of the game where you have 7 power, hopefully you have a unit, and you put this on it, it's the biggest unit on the board. I think that's a safe bet. And maybe by then your opponent's out of removal and that unit kills them or something. But again, it's a 7 cost weapon. Like, it's something that costs 7, and if you don't have a unit, it does nothing. Which is bad. I
Yep.
like my 7 cost things to be really powerful, and I suppose this is powerful, but it's not powerful on its own. And that's kind of my issue with this.
Yeah, I don't think this is even really what the mid-range decks want, because you just kind of want to have board presence, and this, and usually by the time that you get to that stage, is like the board is kind of mucked up, and it's going to kind of trade your unit plus your weapon against two of theirs, which is fine. But the fact that it costs 7 makes it so clunky, and you really want to have something good that can wear this. Like, it's not even like you have very many flyers in Fire to put this on, which will really take advantage of it. It's playable. But I think that you definitely don't want this as just in your average random Fire deck, because most of your average Fire decks just don't want any 7-drops.
Right.
And this isn't like a compelling 7-drop to add to your deck. So I'm gonna put this as like D+.
Sure, that seems like a good place to start. If you need a big 7-cost spell in Fire, I guess you'll get one of these at some point and put it in there. But yeah, I've never played anything that cost 7 in Fire before, so I don't know how like, again, the format's slower. You might just need something like this, but I'm thinking with Fire you don't want to.
Nope. No, the next card is a 9-drop that you would really want in your Fire deck.
Yeah, I'll take as many of these as I can.
Okay, we're gonna go through this one quickly because this is a Ultra Bomb and don't think it requires very much explanation.
Yeah.
9-drop for Fire. Sindok, Rage Incarnate, legendary flying dragon that costs 1 less for each damage your opponent has taken this turn. It is not that hard to deal 6 damage in a turn, especially if you're being fairly aggressive. And when this lands on the board, your opponent dies shortly thereafter.
Yeah, 7 attack in the air. That's a lot.
Yeah, like if they can beat this, good for them. I just don't think they're going to. This is a very, very easy A.
Yeah, this thing's insane. If it's in a pack, take it. And congratulations, you'll just win some games.
And you win some shift duns too, just a whole package.
Oh yeah.
Just a great day.
Yep.
So that concludes our Fire review. And we are going to get started now with time. So any comments from you ending with Fire? I felt it was a little bit underpowered and a little bit conflicted. To me, like, there were these really, really aggressive cards, but I didn't feel like it had quite the density of support that was necessary to turn up this like hyper-focused aggro deck to me.
Yeah, Fire's just weird. If you go back and like just look at the set for Fire, all right, there's 2 1-drops at common. There's 1 2-drop at common for Fire. It's literally Blink Wolf and nothing. It's just very weird. Like, curve-wise, it's really, like, you just can't get good early threats in set 2 in Fire. So you really need to get them in set 1, because basically what you're getting from set 1 in Fire is, like, Blink Wolves, Pummels, if you think Young Gun's good, Young Gun, and then, like, the 4-drops, the Audacious Bandits, the Warriors, and the 5-drop removal. Like, you're not getting your early aggressive units, so you either need to fill that with like strangers if you're trying to be aggressive, or you really rely on set 1 to get your 1-drops, and that's putting a lot of faith there.
And this is much different than set 1, where the Fire aggro decks were fairly intuitive, because you just have Oni Roni and Torch staring you in the face, and like the strangers, like the 1-drop stranger was also really powerful. There were other 1-drops in other factions that support it. Ends up feeling a little bit weird in this set. I don't think the Fire decks are going to be, the Fire aggro, like dedicated Fire aggro, is going to be nearly as powerful. But you'll be able to pull them together every now and then. I'm more interested in the mid-range decks, and we'll have to figure out how those look.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it's going to be a tricky thing that's a bit different than what we're used to for Fire. It's just a different world for them.
Yep. So now let's get into time.